Cattle in Print, an eco-critical examination of the medium of the pastoral print and the rise of industrialized animal agriculture by Beth Shepherd. Framed in eco-critical art history, I will discuss the interplay between the visual representation of cattle in the medium of the pastoral print and the implementation of modern industrialized agriculture. Eco-critical art history means using an interdisciplinary ecological lens when undertaking analysis and critique of art and visual culture in order to better understand how images reflect, inflect, and shape our environmental understanding over time. With an eye to animal studies, I realized that the quaint pastoral might be a place to find cattle and cows in an otherwise homocentric art world that could shed light on how the current systems of industrialized animal agriculture came to be. Compared with paintings, once only within the purview of the well-to-do, prints would be more available to the wider public and a better gauge of changing social priorities. The pastoral has been a recurring theme since antiquity, rooted in the idylls of Greek poet Theocritus and the eclogues of Roman poet Virgil from the 3rd and 1st centuries BCE, respectively. Using the lives of shepherds, they told complex tales of the pleasures, hardships, and disillusionments of life in idyllic and Arcadian settings. Since the revival of classicism in the Renaissance, the pastoral has come to mean a set of literary and artistic devices used to broadly represent humanity's multifarious relationships with the natural world. Although sometimes strictly for escapist pleasure, pastoral art has often been used as a refuge in times of war, revolution, cataclysmic change, and loss, and has served as elegy or memento mori. The pastoral mode has some fundamental characteristics that underpin it. First, it centers on the lives of shepherds living in bucolic settings, or on rural or country life in general. It often includes some form of retreat and return, such as from the city to the country, or a metaphorical return to the place of one's own childhood memories. It favors the country over the city, the shepherd over civilization, and it tends towards idealization over reality. It may also have some subversive or ambiguous political undertones. Berger et bergère conversant is an example of a traditional pastoral. It is an etching made by French Baroque painter and printmaker Claude Lorrain, one of the first important French artists to be interested in portraying pastoral landscapes as a subject of art. A number of scholars have discussed the recurrence, reflexivity, and resiliency of the pastoral mode over 2 millennia. The consensus is it is here to stay, both as a critical framework and a mode of literary and visual art. Terry Gifford, in his book Pastoral, provides a useful framework for considering the pastoral mode in its various forms. Claude's Berger et bergère conversant, already seen, is an example of the traditional pastoral closest to its roots in antiquity, which generally includes shepherds and their animals in an idyllic landscape. With the rise of Romanticism in the wake of the agricultural and industrial revolutions, the pastoral morphed in ways to appeal more to the senses and emotions than reason. While the shepherds may be omitted, the Romantic pastoral glorifies rural or country life while minimizing or obfuscating the realities of modernization, hardship, and oppression. The American pastoral is its own kind of romantic pastoral that I will explain further on. The pejorative pastoral goes beyond romanticization to oversimplification and sentimentalization. It can also be applied to parodies of pastorals. Gifford describes the anti-pastoral as correcting the idealism and nostalgia of the pastoral through the use of realism and is often characterized by harshness and unattractiveness. Finally, the post-pastoral is more ecocentric than other forms of pastoral. Gifford explains that post does not refer to a time period or transcendence of the problematics of the pastoral. Instead, it is an exploration of them, especially regarding lines between human and non-human beings, and culture and nature. We'll see examples of these forms a little further on. Although cattle have been an exchangeable form of wealth for thousands of years, capitalism as an economic system arose in Europe in the wake of Enlightenment in the 18th and 19th centuries, when agriculture shifted from pastoral and subsistence farming to production to meet market demands. Producing food became more about making and accumulating capital than feeding people. Technological innovation led to increased productivity and the displacement of many farm workers and tenant farmers. One of the technologies applied to British livestock production was a selective breeding program to retain the purity of the desired characteristics correlated with an animal's intended commercial purpose, for example, cuts of beef or quantity of milk. These standards were promulgated to graziers through the distribution of reproductive prints, such as this engraving of the Durham ox. This animal became an early exemplar of the shorthorn breed of cattle. These reproductive prints were sold by the thousands and played a transformative role in the enculturation of the animal within a structure of agrarian and culinary economics. In the Romantic period, nature was seen as a comforting source of physical and spiritual sustenance, and pastoral celebrated the dominion of mankind over nature. Samuel Palmer was a British landscape painter, printmaker, and writer, and a key figure in Romanticism in Britain. The early ploughman portrays a farmer heading out with his oxen at sunrise, while the opposing print, The Weary Ploughman, shows him wending his way back home at sunset. While Palmer's prints do not minimize the hardship of rural life, they do glorify a form of labor already obsolete when these etchings were made. The American pastoral prints of the 18th and 19th centuries intertwined the European pastoral tradition with Thomas Jefferson's agrarian politics and envisioned hard-working yeoman farmers, lords of their own soil, oppressed by no one. On the left, the hand-colored lithographic print by Francis Floribond Palmer, called American Farm Scenes No. 1, bears the iconography of the perfect American farmscape, a modest but prosperous homestead, healthy fat animals, flowing fields, and the hard-working farmer in charge of it all. Nostalgic pastoral prints such as these were widely distributed by publishing companies like Currier and Ives well into the 20th century, thereby perpetuating the American agrarian dream long after its demise. In contrast, I show Edward Hopper's American Landscape, which pictures a gable clapboard farmhouse wedged between a railroad track and an austere background. I sense an eerie foreboding from this picture. To me, the train tracks symbolize the arrival of a multitude of disruptive technologies into the pastoral landscape. Alexander Hoag's End of the Trail is a good example of the anti-pastoral, showing the harsh realities of the Dust Bowl era. It is a mediation on the ecological destruction of the Dust Bowl caused by a combination of agricultural mismanagement and drought conditions. The depleted fields have turned to dust stretching to the distant horizon. Present are a plowshare, a tumble-down barbed wire fence, and a cattle skull. This arid scene is literally the end of the trail for the cow, but may also be an elegy for the agrarian dream. In sharp contrast to Hoag's End of the Trail is the May 19, 1934 cover of the New Yorker magazine, picturing a lone cow standing under a tree on a hill watching the flow of urbanites into the countryside. Andrea Vesentini in The Vanishing Cow describes how from the mid-30s to the mid-60s, the New Yorker magazine used the pastoral trope to elicit a sense of nostalgia for the good old days, while masking problems facing the country. Strong elements of nostalgia, over-sentimentality, and parody would define this as a pejorative pastoral. Post-war prosperity and population growth in North America brought increased demand for beef and dairy. In response, the U.S. government implemented policies to increase meat production by way of concentrated animal feeding operations known as CAFOs or factory farms. In Cow, Andy Warhol uses commercial printmaking techniques to treat the already commodified cow with the same seedy glamour of his celebrity art. While real cows were disappearing into CAFOs and factory farms, the cow image was treated like a celebrity. Canadian artist Joe Fafard was the first to admit that the heartwarming image of cow and calf in Pieta was created out of cherished memories of his early life on his family's Saskatchewan farm. Advertisers and marketing boards quickly realized that they needed to keep alive the myths of the happy cow and the family farm in order to please consumers. These types of pejorative tropes of the pastoral are ubiquitous in art, advertising, cartoons, and our own deep-seated beliefs. Sue Coe is an artist who has achieved widespread recognition as one of the world's most engaged activist artists, known for her explicit expose of farm animals' pain and suffering. Coe's feedlot pretty much speaks for itself as an anti-pastoral, with uncountable cattle wedged together like sausages, constrained by a foreboding human figure in the foreground and a looming processing plant on the horizon. Using satellite imaging data, Mishka Henner's Feedlot series provides aerial views of the places where cattle actually live today. Coronado Feeders reveals what a large-scale CAFO in Texas looks like from above. The prominent red sore is a manure lagoon, while the little black dots are cattle. Feedlots and confinement agriculture are widespread in the U.S. and Canada, and the intensive agriculture model have been exported globally, contributing to climate change and other environmental and social harms. The pastoral was never about the cow, but about us. The post-pastoral challenges the homocentric hubris of other pastoral forms, replacing it with a more ecocentric and inclusive perspective. In Look Me in the Eye, Cow, I wanted to make a pastoral that truly centered on the cow, a post-pastoral cow. In this print, I used juxtapositioning and irony to establish a dialectic between our often pejorative views of the contented cow and the family farm and the actual lives of animals. Like Henner's work, the background is an aerial landscape marked by the grid of feedlots, this time in Alberta. The subject is a lino-cut impression of a cow. The daisy border is meant to add an ironic, homey pastoral touch. I met the model for Cow with her calf on a small farm near Ottawa. Looking in her eyes, I could see her protective intelligence and felt a connection with her. Although in cow terms she was probably living the good life, I reflected on how the natural behaviors of countless billions of cattle and cows housed on feedlots and factory farms were being denied. In conclusion, using the pastoral as an eco-critical framework, I have provided a short history of animal agriculture through the medium of the pastoral print. Reflected in these prints, we can see how societal attitudes and values about the land and livestock have evolved over time. From antiquity, pastoralism was a way of life, a background for human drama. With the socio-economic changes of the 17th to 19th centuries came the early stages of agricultural industrialization. The popular pastoral print wielded political power by glorifying nature, romanticizing country life, and sentimentalizing older forms of farming. During the 20th century and to the present day, the pastoral has been regarded as passé and has gone largely unnoticed. Nevertheless, the romantic and pejorative pastoral tropes are used extensively in popular literature, visual culture, media, and advertising to deny or disguise the horrendous conditions of the global agribusiness. Continuously bombarding adult and child audiences, they reinforce outmoded values and a sense of entitlement. Climate activism and the pandemic have put global concerns for the environment, nature, and even food animals front and center. Although I have taken a very Western, Euro-American perspective in my talk, this story could be retold from myriad points of view, wherever colonialism or capitalist oppression have transpired. The power and resilience of the pastoral, especially in its anti-pastoral and post-pastoral modes, make it a useful tool for artists, scholars, and activists in unmasking the status quo and responding to the realities of the Anthropocene.